I'm sure you have heard the term, save it for a rainy day, okay? Now, how that's going to apply to this particular video when we're talking about fire building and emergency preparedness and a go bag, okay? Now, let me touch on that one real quick. A couple weeks ago, there was a viewer who said, hey, I really like your channel. I'd really be interested in your take on how Horace Kephart and Nesmith and Eves and all these other historic campcraft writers, how would they put together a go bag? And at first I was like, all right, this is going to be an awesome video. I'm going to start with food. I'm going to put all the clothing in the bag and everything. We'll do an unpacking of the bag and things like that. But as I started to put that together, I was like, you know, this is a broad topic. Yeah, I could show you what I suspect that they would take in their bag and everything, but that would eliminate, I think, the core purpose of preparedness and a go bag. Okay, so I'm going to do a series step by step on what I think the historic campcraft writers, Ernest Thompson Seton, Baden Powell, already named a couple of the other big ones, but anyhow, how these guys probably would have approached this modern contemporary idea of a go bag, right? And it all starts with skills. I honestly believe that all the historic campcraft writers who were students before they were teachers, they would go back to this idea of skills and practicing skills. Now, in this series, I'm not really going to teach you per se skills, but I'm going to give you some insights I think that are really important to developing your skills, okay? And today's video especially is about fire. And you may be wondering, well, why fire? Why are we starting with fire? And that's another thing. Like you could start anywhere. And between all the different topics I figured that needed to be addressed, it was either fire or it's first aid. Because they kind of go hand in hand either way. Same thing with knife craft skills. If you get hurt by fire or a knife, you got to be able to take care of yourself, things like that. So first aid probably be the first. But it's just, I thought it was kind of a boring topic to start this series. So I went with fire. Because teaching people outdoor skills, yeah, some people get into knife craft, but it seems like a lot of people really get excited about learning how to make a fire. So that's why we're starting here. Just like when I teach my scouts, I always try to teach them something that they have some success with and they get excited about, because that will drive them to wanting more knowledge, that thirst, if you will. So we're going to start with fire today for those reasons alone. Another reason why we're starting with fire is because when you're outdoors and you're in an emergency situation, fire is going to give you several things. Now, when you ask the question, oh, what's fire going to give you? First thing that probably comes to mind is warmth, right? Yeah, warmth. A sense of safety, if you will, right? And I'm not just talking about safety from predators. Certainly there is that. But there's also safety with the morale, your mindset. Because fire gives people comfort. Having light in a dark place gives people comfort. And if you can make a fire, and if you can sustain that fire, then there's also that sense of accomplishment. So there's a lot of morale that goes into it. And in a survival situation or a scary situation, you know, your morale is just as important as your food and water and everything else. Because if you have low morale, you're not going to have the drive to push on. Okay? So fire gives you warmth, it gives you safety, it's going to provide you safe meals, it's going to boil your water. So it's really important right there next to food, water, and shelter. Okay? All three of those, to an extent, are tied to this idea of fire. All right, to eat meat, for example, you got to cook it, otherwise you can get diseases, you can get sick. Same thing with water. Here in the United States, especially, there's hardly a water source out there that you can just pick up and drink without fear of Giardia or some other type of nastiness that's going to give you the squats. And that's just going to dehydrate you more and put you in a serious, dangerous position. So if things get really, really bad, you need to have fire to make your food, to make your water, to provide you warmth, to provide you light, provide you comfort, safety, morale. Okay? So fire, all right? So the skills that the campcraft writers, I think, would really focus on, especially if you're a new camper, is the ability to make a fire. And making a fire with an assortment of different tools, right? And with weather conditions included. So if you are new or rusty, you haven't done it for a while, and I actually did this to myself because I was going through the process of this video and trying to come up with ideas and notes and things. And I was like, you know what? It has been so long since I have made a flint and steel fire successfully. I'm going to try to figure out, working backwards, how fine of shavings or dust or what kind of materials do I need to have to successfully make a fire from flint and steel? I was not successful. I was frustratingly unsuccessful. It has been so long since I've practiced making a flint and steel fire. It's so easy when you pick up the tinder that you've stored up from home or whatever, but when you're actually in the woods or you're trying to use things that you have access to that's just right, like sticks, just a plain stick, and you're like, I'm going to shave this stick down to super fine material and I'm going to get dust off of it, and I'm going to use my char cloth that I saved up and striking that and blowing it. If you haven't done that in a while, especially on a humid day like here in Ohio when I was trying it, you just realize how unprepared you really are. Okay, so working yourself backwards, and when I say that I mean successful. What are you really good at? Okay, I can light a fire with a lighter. All right, I can do that with various different types of tenders. I can be successful in this in humid weather, damp weather, or whatever. Like, okay, well, let's go back another one. So I can do it with a lighter. Can I do it with a fire steel, for example, or a ferrocerium rod? Can I do it with matches? Can I do it with charred rope? Can I do it with friction? All right? And if you do this in your backyard, especially under controlled environment and circumstances, you can really pick up the areas that you're weak, pick up areas that you have a strong suit in, and you can build from that. Okay, so again, this is not a skills video, but it is to hopefully get you to thinking when you're trying to put together a to-go bag, what do you need to have in that to-go bag to make sure you're successful? And it needs to match your skill. What's the point of having a flint and steel kit in your to-go bag, in your emergency preparedness bag, but you don't actually have the skill to do that successfully in an emergency? It's not a good idea. You're setting yourself up for failure, okay? You are setting yourself up for failure. So don't do that, whether it's 100 and some years ago or today. You know, you gotta take with you what you are skilled in using. And you need to practice and do it before it gets to that point. Okay? With my troop, my scouts, that's why I'm wearing the whole scout thing, because this is like a perfect Scoutmasters type lesson. Okay, when you practice something, you need to do it at least 10 times successfully before you move on to the next thing. I was reading a book that Mr. Denny actually gifted me. It was Camping in the Old Ways, or Campcraft in the Old Ways, or whatever, by Dave Westcott. And I've been wanting to read this book forever, right? But in that book, he does a great job of summarizing a bunch of different campcraft writers. And he brought back something that was used in The Woodcraft Indians by Ernest Thompson Seton. It was also in various historical scoutmasters handbooks and things like that. So youth organizations are using this same idea. You need to have a success practice at least 10 times before you can really move on to the next thing. I'm an Eagle Scout, and my scoutmasters, whole troop, like everybody was required. If you're going to get signed off on that fire building, you need to be able to make a fire, and you only have 3 matches. If one match breaks, well, sucks. You know, that happens, right? If one match goes out, that's not good. What about if one fizzes out? Like you strike it, it doesn't even really light. Now you have 3 matches that's gone. You know, that's not good, okay? So you might only have 1 out of 3 matches that you're relying on to get a fire going. That really pushes the pressure on the preparation aspect of it. And in scouting, it's all about being prepared, right? So I'm tying this all together. I promise it's all about fire building so far, right? But my ADD might be like, you know, it seems like I'm going different places in different directions, but this is all layered. So if you're going to pack Flint and Steel in your pack as a to-go bag, then you need to be able to successfully create a fire with Flint and Steel at least 10 times. And if you're really wanting to push yourself, and you probably should, right, especially if it is an emergency situation, you need to be able to do that, not just in warm, dry conditions, but you need to be able to start a fire and maintain a fire with Flint and Steel, even in damp or wet conditions. If you can't do that, then that is extra weight, extra material that should not be in your to-go bag, because it does not match the skill level that you have, okay? So let's take Flint and Steel, which that's what this old Boy Scout kit is here. Like, it has a Flint and Steel, old school. And when you purchased it, it came with tinder. Every scout, every person who goes out in the woods should carry some tinder with them that they know that they can light really fast, really, really well. Now, historic tinder was flax linen. So they would have the flax that you would start your Flint and Steel fires with, which works really, really well. It's hard to get flax today. You can order it, but it's kind of expensive. So I took rope and I unthreaded it and everything. I got this little bird's nest, so I can take a small piece of this rope and I can start a fire with it. It does not work quite as well as flax, keep in mind though. So if you're really, really wanting a good tinder bundle, you should have something that you can light easily and efficiently. So this is kind of what I got. Other things that you may want to include modern-wise are certainly like different modern contemporary like fire ropes. You know, that stuff lights really easy. You could make the cotton balls soaked in petroleum jelly, something like that. Now, if you do those types of things and getting Flint and Steel, you might have a lot more success. Now, Flint and Steel, from my experience, doesn't work so well with the cotton ball and petroleum jelly, but you know, your experience may vary and differ from mine. But Flint and Steel really should be absolutely 100% last resort. Nesmic probably carried a Flint and Steel bundle. Kephart, who was an avid smoker, he's a pipe smoker, he probably did not bother with Flint and Steel. At the time, he probably had a rope lighter. That way, in case in the wind and everything, he could light his pipe with a rope lighter. He probably had, well, I know he had matches. He always says that he carried a set of matches on his person and in his bag, right? Emergency set of matches. And he probably had a type of lighter besides just the rope lighter. 3 methods. And you don't need a whole lot of skill to use any of those particular methods. Now, this idea of starting a fire with wood, now, this is a homemade kit that I made my kids for them to practice, made it my scouts. But making a friction fire is a great skill to have in case of an emergency. But you are expending so many calories. You are using so much of your energy in doing this particular fire method that, again, this is an emergency. I would not bother having a fire kit, which a fire kit usually doesn't include the bow, because you can go out to the woods and you can find a bow, unless you're out west where there's not a lot of trees, as I found out during my cross-country road trip. I really feel bad for y'all who live out west and who don't have trees. But having a fire kit that includes the hearth board, the spindle, and the bearing block. I guess you could make a bearing block fairly easy. You could make a spindle fairly easy, but in the wet weather, trying to find a dry one might be kind of frustrating. So having a fire kit like this, that's extra weight, it's extra bulk. I wouldn't bother this for my to-go bag. I really wouldn't. And contemporaries. Okay, so let's talk about the contemporaries. I'm going to leave the rope lighter in here because I think it's still a very good way, and it's a medium ground, it's a middle ground, if you will, between the flint and steel and contemporary. Because with the flint and steel, you got to have some type of charred tinder, whether it be charred cloth or charred wood, something like that, that you can use that can light quickly, hold the ember, so then you can apply that to the bird's nest. Okay? So you got to have a lot right there in that little kit. And it takes some skill to strike flint with steel. I mean, it's not a lot of skill, but knowing exactly what you're kind of looking for on your flint, otherwise you're just trying to crush rock, essentially. Like, you got to have a fine edge and steel and all that jazz. So I think if you're going to have something like that, and this is kind of bulky, right? You still want to have your tender something, but having a rope lighter like this, a trench lighter, takes up no space whatsoever. And if you are a smoker, where you got the benefits of not an open flame, just like the old trenches, but you can take this lighter, light it, and automatically you got yourself an ember right there. No skill whatsoever. So I actually sell this on my site. I have this, and I'll put it below in the description box. But having a rope lighter is a great emergency thing to have. And you can even make your own if you want. There's instructions on how to do that. But having a rope lighter, they're really cheap, they're really efficient, and I love it. That'll help you out. So that's like an emergency, last ditch. I have expended everything else. This is what I got to make a fire. So having a flint and steel in this form, I think, is important. Now, this, you get thousands upon thousands of uses with a ferrocerium rod in various different sizes, and of course, depending on your skill, the size of ferrocerium rod you're going to use. Bushcrafters use this all the time, right? And I think it's a good skill to have, but have you tried using your ferrocerium rod in your grill, your backyard, okay? Using just shavings, using just the things that you can find in your backyard. Maybe you've got a dried stick from a bush or something, and you're shaving that down. Have you tried doing that with any success? If you do that with some level of success, my compliments to you, okay? But just like the flint and steel, using a ferrocerium rod and having success with it, and I saw this on Alone. I think it was on episode 1 or episode 2 that's on Netflix right now. I felt so bad for the poor guy, and I related to him because he just spent the whole day striking on his ferrocerium rod, and it was raining and it was wet conditions. And it's like, yeah, like what's your tender? Just like the flint and steel, a ferrocerium rod is dependent on your tender. What are you striking those sparks onto? Is it dry enough? I did this in my backyard. I was like, hey, I'm going to grab this tin of a charred cloth. And I tried it with my flint and steel first. It's like, man, like I could not, even though the sparks were hitting it, the charred cloth and the humidity and everything made it really difficult to use. So then I went to my ferrocerium rod, and even with my ferrocerium rod, throwing sparks directly at it, it took like 4 or 5 strikes. spurts of this steel coming out. It took 4 or 5 of those strikes to get that to ignite. And that was in pretty ideal conditions. You know what I mean? And it opened my eyes like, man, 4 or 5 strikes. And this is after trying to strike it with my Flint and Steel, which was throwing sparks just fine. Right? So it's not necessarily a skill of striking the steel with the flint. Like, I was making sparks, that wasn't the problem. But the material I was using was not able to be successful in that. Like, I was going to wear myself out doing it. At that point, it starts to kind of look like the wood bearing block system, you know, trying to start a fire with friction fire. Okay, and you're trying to conserve energy. So if you have any intention of taking flint and steel, using a ferrocerium rod, which there's just a tiny itty bitty ferrocerium rod on this thing that gets that rope lit and get your coal, if you will, or your ember. If you're going to use this, and this is going to be in your emergency kit, it's great to have an emergency, but you got to have the skill to take material, render it down, or find material, render it down so that this can be successfully used. If you don't, then you're going to be in trouble again. It's another reason why this skill is probably so foundational before crap hits the fan, before you have to go make your fire or boil a cup of water, because if you don't have water, you're going to get dehydrated, you're going to feel bad and everything. This is an important skill to have. So that brings us to the other 2 options. Okay, what should be in your bag? Number 1. Okay, number 1 thing that should be in your bag is a lighter. And I'm not even talking about a Zippo lighter, because if this is really going to be in your bag and you're going to forget about it, the fuel itself is going to dry out and it's not going to work. All right. So if you do take like a refillable lighter, then you got to have the extra fuel. That way it can be fresh and you can use it. Okay. But having some type of lighter, whatever is your preference, but make sure it's serviceable and it's usable. Matches. Making sure that you have matches, and they make modern day emergency matches that will strike really, really well and stay lit for a long time. That should probably be in your to-go bag. But historically, Kephart, Edward Caves, Nesmic, Thomas Seton, Baden-Powell, all those guys, and several of them were pretty heavy smokers. They're going to have a lighter, they're going to have matches, they're going to have extra matches, so if this gets used and they have to dip into their reserves, they know that things are getting serious, that they need to get back to camp. And they probably have something like this, okay? Something like a rope lighter, or if not a rope lighter, they're going to have a type of tinder that is easily lit, so that way you can take it to your bird's nest or other collected materials and get a fire going. Okay, you've got to have that ember. The fire starts with an ember. All right? So I hope this discussion and this, I guess if you would call it lecture, if you will, helps you think about a historical go bag. If you're trying to put together a historical go bag, I would not have flint and steel. I would not have a bearing block set. These are the things I would have. And you should always have 3 methods of making fire. I would have my lighter, I would have my matches, and I'd have my rope lighter as well. So if everything else, there we go. I got 3 ways of making fire. I'm good to go. So I can cook, I can make my water, and I can have my warmth. My morale can go up after drinking that coffee or cocoa or something. I'll be like, all right, I know the world's gone crazy, but everything's going to be okay, because at least right now, at this moment, I am safe, I am somewhat comfortable, and I have my beverage, whatever it is that you like, right? Maybe it's even bouillon cubes and water. You know, you're sipping on beef bouillon. You know, that is comfort, and it's going to be okay, and that's going to put your mind in a good place. Same thing if you get lost. So maybe you got your to-go bag, if you will, but every time that you go on a hike, you should probably have some type of minimalist to-go bag in case you get lost, in case you get stuck or something. So if you're not even a preparedness person, hopefully this series, this discussion, especially with a historic sense, will tell you what should be in it. But all those campcraft writers, when they're talking about fire, these are the things that they're talking about in their kits. Having various lighters and always having matches. And having your matches in some type of container. That way it's not going to get wet or damp. There's a video that I did about the Marbles match case. Mr. Marbles, just like several others, he wasn't the first guy who came up with this idea, but he took the idea and ran with it. He took two shotgun cases, closed them together, a larger one and a smaller one. And that was the whole purpose behind the shape and the size and everything, because they're two shotgun shells close into each other. You could take a medicine bottle. You could do the same. You don't have to get uber fancy. You don't have to go out and buy historical gear. You probably got stuff sitting around home that you can use to be a small container for matches. You probably have a Bic lighter or something that you can grab, and you can put that in a bag. Now this one, you can make it if you really want to, but they're really, really cheap. Just, I don't know how much time you want to spend on it. Maybe it's a skill you want to develop on, but just buy yourself a rope lighter. And make sure it lights, practice using it, and you're good to go. Okay, and again, that'll be in my description box below. Okay, so if you like this video, please click like. Let me know what you think about this discussion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there a historical device that you know of that was not mentioned in this that you believe that the historic campcraft writers would have included? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear what you guys have in your hike bags or your to-go bags in regards to the fire. And let's help each other out. Even if it's a contemporary one and it's like a branded thing, let me know if what you've used and what you really like. Help each other out. That's what I'm saying. This should be a great opportunity, a great topic to share with each other on what works really well and why you use it. Love to see it. I can't wait. This is going to be an awesome little series. I appreciate the viewers who give me suggestions, who give me their opinions and everything, because your ideas sparks my ideas and like, wow, you know what? That's a really good one. And with the time, maybe I can push off one of my other video ideas and put that in because it's timely. And obviously if you have an interest in it at that moment, you're probably not alone. There's probably others who have the same interest. Okay. All right. Now, really quick, that brings me to my point of discussion I want to share with you about this channel. So school's going to start soon. I actually have to go back to school the beginning of August. My summer's pretty much up. And it's been an awesome summer. And I had hoped with the limited time that I had in July that I'd be able to make some extra videos and set myself up for the rest of the year. And I was getting stressed out about it. And here's the thing about the YouTube channel. There's a lot of things that I want to keep doing to promote value to those of you and give you guys more, okay? But also to take off some of the work on my plate, basically, because making a video, even something like this, where it's kind of staged and everything, I'm not outdoors, I'm not setting up a camp, I'm not making a fire and all that. Even just making this video with the ideation, gathering up the materials, writing out the notes, doing the research and the reading, things like that, that all takes a lot of time. And then once the video is made, you got to edit it, and editing takes so long. And I don't even edit it out like some of those who, like I've got ADD, but like, whew, some of those editors, they're just increasing my ADD with all the different cuts and stuff they do to keep attention. And I get it. That's what you got to do for keeping people involved and intrigued and stuff. I'm not going to do that. I don't have time to do that. And I've got a young family. And I want to make sure that the value that I'm putting out to y'all in the various different forms that I keep doing is not necessarily hurting my family and the time that it takes away. So I want to keep doing things for you guys, and I want to keep expanding on what we're doing on this channel because I'm seeing positive things come from it, like the podcast. So the podcast is really cool because I can record it on the camera and I can also put it out in audio. So just doing a monthly podcast with someone new to interview and getting some outside perspective and stuff or even something I just think we can just talk about that doesn't require, you know, someone to see it, right? See a prop or something. So the podcast is still going to be a monthly podcast. Okay, so that's 1 week per month. I need to start focusing more on my Patreons, because I feel like as my Patreons keep growing and things, I want to keep giving them more value, because without our patrons, then this channel just wouldn't be able to do what it's able to do, right? I wouldn't be able, for example, to have the audio equipment. I wouldn't be able to pay for the podcast, because there's a monthly subscription fees. There's a lot of fees that goes into that. So I need to focus on my patrons, and once a month for my patrons now is going to be the first week. So I'm not going to have a video on the YouTube channel, the free YouTube channel, on the first week of the month, because it's going to be for my patrons on Patreon. Okay, so I'm going to focus on doing a live video with them once a week, and it'll be uploaded for them to exclusively see and have a discussion with. Okay, and maybe if they want to share it, I'll share it to y'all. But right now I'm pretty sure I'm just going to keep it as Patreon exclusives, because they're going to be in-depth discussions of things. We're going to talk about some stuff that's probably important to them about the channel, outdoor skills, history, stuff like that. So first week, won't have a video on the YouTube channel. It's going to be a Patreon exclusive. If you're interested, no matter what you give, you can get access to that. So even if it's $1 a month, you know, it's $1 into the door, if you will, but it helps move this channel forward. We're going to be doing that. I have a goal of starting to do 1 outdoor video per month. And I'm not going to commit myself to if that's going to be the 2nd week, 3rd week, or 4th week of the month, because I don't think I can commit to that. But 1 video a month is going to be an outdoor video, and hopefully it's going to be a skills-based type video. Okay, and if nothing else, show you some really cool equipment being in actual use. All right, so we're going to start doing that. That's my goal for the time being. I'm thinking that I may do 1 other video on the YouTube channel. So on the YouTube channel, we're going to have 2 monthly videos. We're going to have 2 monthly videos. If you're on Patreon, then you're going to get the exclusive in-person, like live video, if you will, and you're going to have the podcast. Okay, so there's 4 videos there. As the year progresses, though, it may, I'm not saying it will, but it may be 1 regular video, like what I usually do, per month, and that'll probably be the outdoor video. It's of time to get outdoors, set up, do the video, and edit it, and things like that. There's a lot that goes into YouTube. So there will be 1 outdoor video. There will be the podcast video. There will be the Patreon exclusive video. So 1 week I may just drop completely. So if you're wanting to see more than 3 videos, or more than 2 videos, depending on how this thing goes, then sign up for Patreon. That way you can get that extra video. And like I said, whatever you give is greatly appreciated. Patreon takes, I think, 30%, if I remember correctly. So, you know, I get the 70% to put back into the channel. So we appreciate, again, all of our patrons on Patreon, because without y'all, then we won't be able to do this. But I do want to kind of pivot this channel a little bit more and do outdoor video once a month to give you guys some insight and see, you know, how these skills really get used and things like that. All right. So if you like that, you know, you can always leave me a comment. I love to hear your comments. But I am thinking, as the school starts up, I don't want to take away from y'all, and I want to keep doing the things that we're doing, including the new newsletter. Okay, because that takes a while too. Got to write up an article for the newsletter, and I don't do a great job of putting on articles on my website because I just don't have the time. So if I can free up time to do the articles on the website, because you got to go to the back door. There's so much stuff you got to do to just write something and upload it onto a website. It's a pain in the butt. And this is a one-man show. That's what this is. It's just me doing everything. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why I started the newsletter, because I thought I was neglecting the website to an extent, and I thought the newsletter would be easier to do and actually go to the people who actually want it and care. You know. All right. So love to hear your comments. Love to hear your feedback. If you like this video, please click like. I appreciate those of you who watch. Even if you're not one of my patrons on Patreon, I appreciate those of you who watch. I hope you learned something from this and you got my own perspective based off of what I've read from Edward Caves, Kephart, Nesmic. There's a guy with a really funny name and I can't remember what his name is. Ernest Thompson Seton, Baden Powell, even David Westcott, you know, in his book that I'm reading. I'm only in the first chapter, but you know, all these guys, they all have one thing in common. All goes back to skill, and all goes back to if you're going to go out in the field, you need to take with you what you are skilled in doing. And if you're not skilled in doing it, it's okay to go out in the field to practice those skills, but make sure you have something else like a lighter. That way you're not going to come back deterred and frustrated and start hating campcraft or the experience and everything. You can still light a fire with a lighter. Just about anybody can do that. And you can just build off of those skills. Okay. All right. I'm starting to ramble, I think. If you want to watch my video about the history of the marbles match case, then check it out here. If you're interested in learning about the trench lighter, because this is a really cool trench lighter, check it out here. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss onto your loved ones, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.